Welcome to Sexy in Your 60s. This is a space for women 50 and beyond who are choosing to live with vitality, intention, and joy in this chapter of life and the ones ahead of us. I'm your host, Dvora Citron, registered nurse, National Board Certified Health and Wellbeing Coach, and Plant Strong advocate. On this podcast, we explore what truly helps women thrive in midlife and beyond through evidence-based health insights, real stories, practical strategies, and the deeper sense of meaning that makes life feel rich and connected. I intentionally chose the title, Sexy in Your 60s. When I use the word sexy, I'm not talking about sexuality or how we're seen. I'm talking about energy, confidence, presence, curiosity, purpose. Sexy is how you feel in your body. Sexy is how you move through the world. Sexy is knowing who you are and choosing how you want to show up. I believe this stage of life isn't about winding down. It's about waking up. Not in your 60s? You're still invited to join us. Each episode is designed to support you not just in how you live, but in how you feel in your body, your relationships, and your life. I'm so glad you're here. Let's begin. Welcome back to Sexy in Your 60s, the podcast where we explore what it means to live with vitality, confidence, connection, and purpose in the second half of life. I'm your host, Dvora Citron, registered nurse, board-certified health and well-being coach, and founder of Slant to Plants. On this show, we talk about the real ingredients of vibrant aging through the lens of science, stories, support, and soul. Today's conversation is about a topic that touches so many women, especially in midlife and beyond: love, partnership, and the courage to stay open to connection. My guest is Leora Hoffman, founder of Love by Leora, a matchmaking company she launched in 1989 after pivoting from a career as an attorney. For decades, she has worked with professional singles in the Washington, D.C. area, helping them meet in a way that is thoughtful, discreet, and deeply personal. Her work focuses on carefully vetted introductions and guiding people toward finding a true life partner. She is also the co-author of Catch Me a Catch, Chronicles of a Modern-Day Matchmaker. What makes this conversation especially relevant for this audience is that Leora has spent years helping people date and build relationships in real life, not just through algorithms, but through discernment, self-knowledge, and human connection. She has also spoken openly about her own reinvention, her personal relationship journey, and her belief that meaningful love later in life is absolutely possible. So today we're talking about what people get wrong about chemistry, what actually matters in lasting partnership, and what it takes to stay hopeful, wise, and open-hearted when it comes to love in this season of life. Leora, welcome to Sexy in Your 60s.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
To start with, you've built a career helping people find love long before all these dating apps took over. What first convinced you that this was your real calling?
I had a network of single professional friends who were having so much trouble finding each other and finding connections. I was home on maternity leave with my second child. I had been working for the federal government as an attorney. I really felt like, having now given birth to my second child, I needed more flexibility and wanted to do something more interesting. So as an experiment, I introduced two people who came from wildly disparate backgrounds. My instincts told me that they would really hit it off. So I introduced them. And the next day I got a phone call saying that they had fallen in love in 20 minutes, that they sat on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial kissing till 1 a.m. She said to me, "Leora, forget law. You have found your calling." So that inspired me to really pursue this as a career because I knew the demographics of Washington, D.C. were it was so heavily populated with single professionals, and I thought there'd be a great business opportunity. Plus, being the true romantic that I have always been, I felt that this would be a wonderful switch for me.
So you started as an attorney, you pivoted into matchmaking, and it's clear that this change revealed who you are and what kind of work you were really meant to do.
I found that I had a gift at doing this. What drew me into the law in the first place was really to help people. I practiced law in a number of different areas, including domestic violence, child protection. What always spoke to me was really to find purpose and meaning in my work. I just felt that having done that, now it was time for me to pivot those skills into helping people find love. I felt that that was really a calling for me because at that time, this was pre internet. No one really was doing this work in the Washington, D.C. area. You had dating services, but you didn't have any matchmakers who were oriented towards professional singles. I felt there was a huge void and that I could fill that void effectively.
It's so wonderful to be able to bring people together in love.
Absolutely.
That has to be such a satisfying thing, not just you finding the right combination, but then watching what flows from it.
Oh, absolutely. There's really nothing more fulfilling than hearing those successes and really understanding the impact that that has on people's lives.
Leora, you've been around for a while, decades now doing this.
Yes, that's true.
What can you say has stayed true about human connection, even with dating culture changing really drastically?
Well, when it comes to love, and that's really my mission, it's not just providing dates for people. Of course, it has to start with an introduction, but really the goal is to have my clients find a love relationship. And so when it comes to love, really, I believe in the old fashioned values that there's really no substitute for the personal touch. And it only takes one right match to that one right person. Even though today there are many, many more choices available to people.
That's an interesting concept to think about because I think it's the access that has changed, right?
Exactly. Sometimes it seems that the more choice people have, the harder it is actually to focus in on one prospect at a time.
Decision fatigue?
Correct. But that's really what it takes to be successful.
What kind of patterns have you seen in people that are really authentically ready for a healthy long-term relationship?
Well, one really has to recognize that when people come to me, first of all, they don't come with a blank slate. They come with experiences. They've been married, many of them. They've been through divorce or perhaps loss of a spouse. I do specialize in the 50 plus demographic. So everyone has had heartache when they come to me in one form or another. They're looking to start a new chapter in their lives, a happy new chapter. Really takes a level of self-awareness so that people who come to me can express what hasn't worked for them, what has worked for them in the past, what deal breakers they may have that they want me to honor. I do much better work for people who already are evolved enough to be able to express that to me. Of course, with people who have more trouble with that, part of my intake process and consultation process is to really tease that out for people. Because the more self-aware one is, the more they're going to be able to identify the right prospect for them.
So when someone comes to you, they already have had the self-awareness that they've chosen a matchmaker to work with. They have cognitive and psychological readiness for that, which is helpful for you. You just mentioned your intake process. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, it starts with a phone call. I'm old-fashioned in the sense that I like to have conversation with people. Other companies make you fill out all these forms before you can even get to a matchmaker, but I like to talk to someone on the phone from the very beginning, get a feel for them. Then, if they sound like someone who really would be appropriate for my membership and what I convey to them makes sense to them, we schedule a face-to-face consultation. During that consultation, which takes almost 2 hours on average, I get a complete history. I get a family history. I get a relationship history. I get a feel for the things that haven't worked for people, the challenges that they may have, things to avoid in future relationships. And sometimes it's necessary to really help people distinguish between what I call negotiable and non-negotiable. Oftentimes, people come to me with a laundry list of attributes that they're looking for in a partner.
And I would assume they also have another list of things they don't want.
Absolutely. But usually it starts with what they are looking for. Sometimes it's everything but the kitchen sink. It's where they live, how tall they are, the color of their eyes, the profession that they're in. My premise that I begin this work with is always that there's no such thing as perfection. No one is ever going to match 100% in every category. But if I can help people tease out what is non-negotiable for them, meaning, and I think it should only be a handful really of attributes, the things without which they could not consider being in a relationship with that person. It goes without saying that attraction. Everyone wants to be attracted. I'm not the kind of matchmaker who says, oh, you'll learn to love them, like the old stereotype. No, if you're not attracted to someone from the beginning, and sometimes it takes time, it may not be that bolt of lightning on a first date, but ultimately, that's one of the non-negotiables. Intellectual compatibility, emotional compatibility, the ability to communicate. For some people, it's a spiritual connection. There really ought to be only a handful of things in the non-negotiable category. And then there are the negotiables that I say people really need to be flexible about, such as I said earlier, where they live, how tall they are, the color of their hair, their eyes, what they do for a living. Those things, although, everyone wants convenience and ease, it doesn't always work that way.
So you talked about attraction, and I know that in your book, you talk about how great relationships don't always start with instant chemistry, and you talk about how people overvalue the spark.
Yes, I have heard so many people say, well, I didn't have a spark with them, so therefore I don't really see the need for a second date. In my guidelines, I recommend that people meet twice. They go into the referral expecting to meet the person twice, unless it's a really negative experience, and I would never push that on someone. But when you talk about chemistry, there are many ways that chemistry can emerge. There's positive chemistry where right away it's obvious that you're attracted to each other and it's easy. Then there's negative chemistry where you look at the person and say, oh no, just not for me. Even if you've seen a photo of them, and I always show photos. But sometimes face to face, it's just not there, or there's something that somehow provokes negative chemistry. Maybe somebody reminds them of their parent or an ex or some things that are inexplicable. Most of the times, or many times, there's what I call neutral chemistry, which means that it's not bells and whistles right away, but there's nothing negative. And my philosophy is that if you have good communication with that person, if you really have a good time talking to them, if you can really go a little deep with them on the first date and have a meaningful conversation, see them again. See them until you know for sure they couldn't be for you, because it can emerge a little later down the road. In my book, I talk about my own story where that's exactly what happened with my husband. I'm forever grateful to the people who introduced the two of us. We had our own matchmakers, actually, because I had somebody supporting me through the process, as I do for my clients. And it makes it much easier to have someone you can bounce things against and express your doubts and get some feedback about that.
I did not have the experience of using apps because I've been married for 40 years and they weren't around. But I know that people, they're still doing this swiping in a direction, depending on if they like the look of someone. I'm curious how that works when you are working with a client. Do you show them photos of the person and do they say no? How does that go for what you do?
I show photos because I don't want to waste anyone's time, my time or theirs. So if somebody is not in the ballpark physically for the other person, then let's not go down that road. I always have people give me recent photos so that I am depicting people accurately. I also work with very talented photographers in case people don't have great images. And I really believe in presenting yourself in as positive a light as possible while being authentic.
Mm-hmm.
I show those pictures because I think it saves everybody time and energy. But a photo is just a snapshot in time. And it does not necessarily predict chemistry. You can have two very beautiful people who just don't click when they meet. That's not something that, as a matchmaker, I can provide. That is the frustrating element of all of this because I can put people together who look great together, who share common values, who have similar goals. But if it's just not there, and I believe that really comes from nature, that's not something anyone can really supply, then it might just as well be a friendship. It's not going to blossom into a romance. There's nothing wrong with making friends. Many of my clients have made very dear friends through the process, but that's not the outcome that they come to me for.
When you introduce people, do they meet for the first time in person? Do they have a phone call or an internet meet?
They meet in person for the first time, and I provide contact information once I arrange the date. I function as a concierge service the first time people get together. And I do that because over the years, when I first started out, I would give people phone numbers and presume that because I was working with professional people, they knew how to arrange a date. And so often it wouldn't happen. Somebody was traveling, somebody met someone else, the momentum gets lost. And so I started arranging the first date to know that once people look at each other's photos and agree to meet based on my description about the other person, it's not just looking at a snapshot. I give people a reason as to why I'm making the recommendation that they meet. Once they agree to do so, I want to nail it down. I arrange a time and place. And then I provide contact information a couple of days prior so that people can reach each other directly. I always suggest that the men call and introduce themselves and say very briefly, I'm looking forward to meeting you, in a few days, talk about the details, and keep it short and sweet. Because it's my view that if you spend an hour on the phone with somebody you've never met, you can sometimes talk yourself out of going on the date.
Mm-hmm.
The phone conversation is not the same as a face-to-face conversation. I give them contact information, then they lay eyes on each other for the first time on the date. Once the date happens, they both give me feedback, and I always ask the men not to ask the women out a second time without checking with me prior because I don't want anyone put on the spot. Now, it has happened that many times the men get so enthusiastic that they forget about my rules and they just go ahead and do it anyway. And usually that only happens when they are very confident that the woman is interested. But sometimes women can, I don't want to say pretend, but sometimes they can be caught up in the moment and then have second thoughts afterwards.
That makes sense. I think that would feel very protective for people too.
Yes, that's my purpose, is to just be respectful of people and also give them some time to think it through, because sometimes they may be ambivalent, but after the conversation with me, they decide that they're more inclined to see the person again. And there's nothing more convincing to a man than my saying to him, "She found you really attractive." All of a sudden, they're much more interested in spending time with her. We're all human and we all need that validation. So I find that having that feedback is so important.
Do you notice you're working with a very professional clientele? In working with the accomplished woman, let's say, do you notice certain blind spots?
Yes, I think sometimes people really want it their way to the point where they might rule out someone who doesn't exactly fit their criteria in that very specific way.
Is that at the beginning when you're just selecting candidates?
Yes. For example, I had a physician come to me who wanted somebody highly educated because she went to Yale Medical School and she was super accomplished in her work. So there were a very limited number of people who would qualify in her case. After I introduced her to a few people who fit those criteria and it didn't click, she finally said to me, maybe it would be okay if they don't have a graduate degree. I just want somebody who is successful in their own right, meaning that they have had a good career, that they're financially solid, that they feel good about themselves. I recently introduced her to a fellow who had worked for state government and very attractive and lovely man. She was really pleasantly surprised. Sometimes people can be their own worst enemies because they really prevent themselves from being open to people who they didn't necessarily think were appropriate for them.
They get in their own way.
Yeah.
What seems really clear to me is working with you, people really have a very special opportunity to develop and expand themselves. Also, your work with these people sets them up for a healthier relationship.
I think so. I believe that when you go into an introduction expecting to like a person, you're more likely to like that person. That it's just the way humans function. When somebody endorses somebody and believes in that match, you go into it with a sense of optimism that you may not have if you're just doing it on your own online or swiping, because then you don't know what you're getting. I give people a context to really understand each other before they even meet. Sometimes there are things that don't exactly fit the mold, but I give people a context to understand each other. And then they're more inclined to really be more open minded.
So, in all this time that you've been doing this, are you able to identify qualities in people that give you the sense that they're going to be more apt to connect and start a healthy relationship?
Yes, the ones who come to me, and as I said, everyone's had previous experience. So the ones who can articulate to me what they learned from past relationships, what their part in the demise of that last relationship might have been, are more likely to be able to course correct for the next one. It's amazing how many people have come to me, and when I ask them why they got divorced, they might say, she had an affair, or he was a workaholic, without really thinking about how they may have contributed to the dynamic that led to that outcome. I very diplomatically help them try and figure that out if they haven't already. But the ones who have and can say, I was young, I didn't really understand how to repair relationship problems, how to resolve conflict, I didn't understand it. And now I'm more wise and more able to do that, are more likely to be successful in the next situation.
So emotional wisdom really
Yes,
is a strong predictor of a potentially successful relationship in the future.
absolutely.
Makes sense.
Yes.
So I want to pivot a little and ask you about your own story, which you said you're willing to share as you have in your book. Your book weaves together your own love story with your clients' stories. What made you decide to start telling your own story along with your professional ones?
Originally, my purpose in writing my book was really to give people an insight into what a matchmaker does. And then I realized that I myself had not had a linear journey in finding love. I was divorced twice when I met my current husband, to whom I've been married for 12 years. People would say, "How could the matchmaker be divorced twice? Like, how can we trust you?" I would say, "I've learned from my mistakes and I'm waiting for that right person." And so I wanted to give people an insight into not only what matchmaking looks like, but also that the matchmaker herself can have challenges, can overcome those challenges, and really to provide a message of hope to people who think that it's too late for them or it's not in the cards for them. I really wanted to give them a message that if I can do it, so can they. I began telling the story in more detail with the encouragement of my editor, who I was working with at the time, who really encouraged me to embellish those stories. With each chapter of a professional theme that I write about, I have a corresponding personal chapter of things that I encountered in past relationships. I talk about childhood crushes, I talk about my divorces, I talk about boyfriends that didn't work out, and I talk about my courtship with my husband and some of the challenges that we've had as a couple who get together later in life. Because I believe that that's inevitable that when people meet in their 50s, 60s, 70s, even 80s, there is bound to be differences that really need to be negotiated. And how do you do that? Really wanting to preserve the love that brought you together and the respect that you need to have in order to have a successful marriage or relationship. Not everyone's looking for marriage necessarily.
One thing that stood out to me in what you just said was how people might have looked at you when you were divorced and maybe in between not partnered with somebody and thought, how could you be qualified to be a matchmaker as a healthcare professional? Any person in a support role, they're not always experiencing what the person they're supporting is experiencing. That's really not the point, although it does help, obviously, with empathy and all that. But you really understand the science of connection. You're the expert in relationships.
I really pride myself on being able, with my 37 years now of experience doing this work, plus also my career as an attorney, being able to understand people, being able to be compassionate for people's heartaches, being an advocate for them, really to fulfill the mission of finding them love. I feel like I have honed those skills over the years, and my own challenges make me even more qualified to understand what other people have gone through.
That's helpful. So, have you ever matched two people up that actually surprised you that things worked out? And if so, did it change your assumptions about what make two people work?
When I make a referral, I like to gauge the probabilities. On one end, long shot. On the other end, I have a really strong feeling about this couple. And usually it's somewhere in the middle where there are reasons to make the referral and there are things that might not work out. I have to say, historically, when I've had that strong feeling about people, I've usually been right. But I've also played those long shots, and sometimes I have been surprised. For example, I introduced a couple who years ago I used to incorporate Myers-Briggs testing into my process. And they tested out to be complete opposites on the Myers-Briggs scale. And I was then working with a consultant who said to me, "This will never work." I don't recommend you make this introduction. But I had a feeling that they would have good chemistry. And so I did it. And sure enough, they hit it off and they fell in love. And they were together for 2 years. Now, ultimately, they did not marry. They did end their relationship after 2 years. But I feel that that is still a success. To have a love relationship for a few years is something really special. And just because people don't decide to marry doesn't mean it didn't have value and it didn't enhance their lives.
Yes, because you talked about how finding love is really the whole point of this, putting people together so they can find love. But alongside that is the issue of loneliness and how it's such a unhealthy phenomena in our community, and it's so pervasive that I love that example that 2 years was a success. So those people were connected in a positive way and not lonely.
I define success as they are in an exclusive dating relationship. Now, I'm very happy to take pride in the marriages that have occurred over the years. I'm thrilled. But really, I believe that I'm successful at the point in which they tell me, please put me on hold. I want to focus on this person and see what happens. Because then it is between them and whether they decide to marry or just live together or they end their relationship, that's between them. Although I have to say, there have been many couples, and my book is full of stories like this, where had I not intervened in the beginning phases of a relationship where people came to me with issues or concerns, had I not intervened in several of those cases, they never would have gotten to the finish line. And in those stories, we're talking about marriage, ultimately, where they did decide to overcome whatever was bothering them and continue in the relationship.
I'd like to ask you now about love the second time around. And my population that I'm focusing on is women in midlife and beyond. And you are serving clients of any gender that are 50 and beyond.
Not only,
Ma-
but I do, that's my specialty.
Okay, great. So many people in this group are not dating, or they're dating after grief, divorce, caregiving, maybe career burnout. And a lot of them are just not used to putting themselves first, which is really common for women at this point of life. What do you do to support them in helping them to begin again without feeling like they're behind and they have so much to catch up on?
You know, this is a population really that is, for me, a privilege to work with because people have done the heavy lifting of building careers, generally, raising children, amassing their financial portfolio. And they're at the point in their lives where they really can focus on themselves and their own happiness for the first time. And a lot of people are tempted to always like put the children first, or they worry that what are the kids going to say? All of these things that might stand in the way. And I really encourage them to embrace this stage in their lives and really look for the happiness that they deserve because no one is going to do it for them. I can provide the most wonderful person in the world to someone, but if they're really not in a position of embracing that and being able to go forward, it's not going to work ultimately. So it's about helping to dispel these myths that they have to sacrifice themselves for their families, for example, forever. We've all heard stories where the kids didn't like the partner. All of those things are complicated, but they can be worked through. I believe the heart is a very versatile muscle, and there can be many, many different forms of love in someone's life, including the love of children and a partner at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive.
Do you see certain barriers that women in this age group have they're maybe coming from all different kinds of situation. They may have lost a partner in all different ways, or maybe they had been single for a long time. What are common barriers you see, and how do you help them overcome those barriers? The question I just asked you before was one of those, but do you see other barriers that are common, and what do you do to help with those barriers?
Other barriers, I believe, include self-limiting beliefs. For example, the 70-year-old woman who says, I'm not pretty enough. My body isn't what it was when I was in my 30s. The man who might come to me and say, I may have problems in the sexual department. I can't guarantee that I can still perform the way I used to. I talk about intimacy, and I talk about the fact that intimacy is not about how you look necessarily or how you perform necessarily. It's about a loving connection. When people are in a loving connection, those things are far less important.
You're really giving people such valuable relationship coaching. Now that I've been married this long, it's saying that every day you're married to a new person because you're a new person and your spouse is a new person. And people don't always get support for their relationship later on in life. The people that work with you are actually getting this updated support to deal with these real life issues like you're talking about that happen as we age. There's not a lot of support and education when you've been in a relationship for a long time about how things look new and different as you age together. It's very special what these people are getting, what your clients are getting.
Thank you. I really get so much joy out of helping people overcome some of these fears and anxieties. And really, when they do find that right person, it is life altering for them.
Leora, what do you think people are really seeking when they say they want love at this stage of life?
Well, they say love, but what does the word actually mean to them? To me, it means a passionate best friend, somebody who has your back, somebody who is your biggest fan, who can support you through the difficult times, who can celebrate the person you are, who can provide joy in your life. Something I talk about a lot is humor. It's so important to be able to approach relationships with humor because there are life situations that happen all the time that can set us back. And I know in particular in my marriage, my husband and I laugh a lot, and we have the ability to laugh at ourselves too. And that's so important because when you can laugh at yourself, the other person relaxes and there's no judgment going on. It's just like, we're going to make the best of this situation. It really helps a lot. It helps soften all of life's challenges in so many ways.
And when you have laughter, you are much more open to accept whatever's coming towards you, especially if it's serious or intense. It's a great coping mechanism. What have you learned about resilience and courage from your clients, especially after they may have experienced disappointing connections or relationships?
Resilience is something that I had bred in me from a very young age, being the daughter of Holocaust survivors and growing up in that environment and having two parents who actually were very funny people and were very personable and social and were able to take risks that some people might not be able to take because, when you've lost it all, it's really not so hard to take some of those risks. I've learned that broken hearts do get repaired. We're not doomed to be alone. I knew of a couple who were in their 90s and they both got COVID and they both ended up hospitalized. She told me afterwards that it was only because of the love relationship that they had that they survived COVID. It was in the early stages where people were dying. We didn't have vaccines yet. She said, but for that relationship, she would not have survived. She was absolutely sure of that.
It's quite romantic, isn't it?
It is. It is. It's so sweet because really it gives people purpose in life.
It does. The fourth touchstone in the framework that I use for podcast is support. And I love for guests to give listeners something that they can take away. So if a woman is listening that is interested in finding love, again, smart, accomplished, over 50, and wondering, is this going to happen for me? Is this still possible? What would your response to her be?
Oh, absolutely, it's possible. As I said, I've seen love emerge at any age. And so I say it's never too late. I found that right partner for me. I didn't meet him until my mid 50s. My only regret was that we hadn't met earlier in life, but it wasn't meant to be until it was meant to be. I always tell people that you've got to make the investment to get the return. You've got to play that lottery to win the jackpot. All of those cliches are saying essentially you've got to just be in the game to get the rewards.
So much of what you do is relationship coaching,
Right.
but there must be plenty of times where your client needs more than that and needs actual therapy. How do you manage when that happens?
Well, I am very fortunate to be associated with some very talented therapists in the area whom I trust. I have referred a number of clients to them where, in the course of my work with them, we encounter issues that I'm not qualified to really help them work through. I'm not a clinician. I have often referred people to therapists, if they're open to it, obviously. With their permission, they have at times signed releases so that I could speak with the therapist. I encourage that because then people have a team working for them where I can confer with the therapist in terms of potential candidates for the client, and they can help me identify the type of people or the issues that surface in the work that they're doing therapeutically.
Your legal background has to bring so much to your role as a matchmaker. Just hearing you describe these different issues that really are important to cover your basis on and be safe about. That's another advantage of working with you.
Yes, it's interesting that the skill set that is required to be a good lawyer is pretty much the same skill set required to be a good matchmaker. It's about listening carefully. It's about having compassion for people who are having challenges and problems. It's about advocating for them in a way where they can really digest the advice and the coaching and the feedback. I may have pivoted professions, but I think I do similar things every day.
Good attorneys, a strong therapeutic skills.
It's about not just telling people what they want to hear. It's about using their expertise to provide information and advice that's in their best interest. There's a difference there. And to do it in a manner where people can accept it and it doesn't get them defensive.
So you really have to understand so much about where they are psychologically and cognitively. I don't know if you do this consciously or it's evolved over time, but you're really helping build their sense of hope for finding the right one.
Absolutely. Hope is really what one has to have in order to really go out there and meet people and date. It's stressful. And if you don't have the hope that you can succeed, it's really not worth making the effort. I think the hope is really the gas that ignites the spark between people.
It gives me the chills when I hear all your stories and your sharing. So I appreciate that. And I'm going to bring in that sparkle word right now, sexy. I don't know if you use that word in your matchmaking. It might be a little dicey to use it, but that's what I use. And I like that it's dicey. So I'm going to ask you, what does sexy mean to you right now? I'd also like to know, do you see that as something that you think about in your matchmaking role?
Absolutely. Sexy to me at this stage in my life means that you're comfortable in your own skin, first of all, that you're in touch with your desires and you're able to act on those desires and not apologize, that you're free of inhibitions that may have, held you back earlier in life, that you're in touch with your passions, that not just sexually, but professionally, socially, that you're a person who lives with passion, and that can have a number of different manifestations, that you just live your life unapologetically and you're just comfortable with yourself. And yes, it comes up in my work too. There are people who tell me they really want to continue to have sexually active relationships in their 70s, 80s. And it's something that I really need to understand about somebody's needs when I'm trying to match them. Because I'm not going to match a person like that with somebody who says, I'm done. I've had that in my life and I don't need that anymore. So I do go there.
I want to make the distinction between sexy and sexuality or sexual relations. Do you feel like you see that sexy vibe coming back, that like people getting their sexy back when they realize they like dating or they've found connection? Can you actually see that
Oh,
expanding,
absolutely.
glowing, and growing?
I see that transformation in people. When they find that person who brings out the joy in them, and joy has many different aspects to it. It's physical, it's emotional. Yes, I have seen people really be transformed, and people coming from profound loss to really be able to enliven themselves again. It's a wonderful thing.
Is there anything that you want to share with the listeners that I haven't asked you about?
Working with a matchmaker is not something that is a sign of defeat, that it is an empowering experience. Some people have called me and said, I've tried everything and now I'm desperate. Can you help me? I say to them, I don't really come from a place of desperation, nor do I want to have clients who are coming from that place. Because I'm a specialist in relationships, just as you might hire an accountant to do your taxes or a realtor to buy a home, if you're ready for a relationship, this is a gift you give to yourself, an investment that you make in your happiness, not a sign of defeat. It's now become a respectable service to have. When I first started, it would be taboo for people to say they worked with a matchmaker, but now there are many more. And it's become a respected profession. And I feel very honored to be doing this work.
I've already told people about you. And one of the questions someone might have when they're listening to this is, what if I'm not in the 50 plus category? And what if I don't live in Washington, D.C.?
I do work with younger clients as well. The way my business is structured is as a membership. One of the levels of membership I offer is what I call an executive search, where I can recruit for people, even if I don't have the right people in my database.
Leora, can you tell us more about what executive search means and what the process is for that?
Yes, I have a level of membership that offers recruitment. And what that means is that not only do I draw from my membership for potential candidates, but I also do a search within the community for those clients. I develop what I call an action plan for them. And I function like a search firm might for someone's career, but for their personal lives. So I have scouts who work with me, who send me referrals, and I implement the plan that the client and I agree on over time to tap into resources and to bring people in who might not even thought of working with a matchmaker. I met them at an event, for example, or they came to me through one of my scouts who knew them. I don't charge a person whom I recruit to meet the client because I've been retained to do that. I have many people who never dreamed of working with a matchmaker whom I recruited and ended up in a love relationship with one of my clients. That allows me to give people many more opportunities to really find the right person. It's not just restricted to my fairly limited membership. And by limited, I mean it's under 1,000 people. It's not a huge database.
Do you share databases with other colleagues of yours?
Yes, we collaborate. That is something that's fairly common in the profession. there are agreements between particular matchmakers as to the level of confidentiality that they're comfortable with, but it offers people another avenue. I have built up very, very positive collaborative relationships with several matchmakers where we matched one of their people with one of my people, and it worked out. It's a win-win situation.
So clients that come to you aren't necessarily limited to just the people in your membership. You may seek out other matches for them, and you may collaborate, like you said, with other colleagues and see if you can make a match.
Absolutely. It's really just a win-win for everyone. I have access to people I wouldn't ordinarily have access to, and vice versa.
Do you give your clients any homework?
I ask them to implement some of the things that I have coached them on. For example, on dates, I had a woman recently who had gone out twice, and she's in her late 70s. And she went out twice with a gentleman, and things broke down a little bit. And I actually sat down and wrote an email that she might send to him to get things back on track. I told her, use your own words, but these are the concepts that I think you need to cover. She did the opposite and then came back to me and said, why didn't it work out? Over time, she has now rekindled that and implemented some of the advice that I gave her. She didn't close the door completely. It would have been much more efficient had she listened to me the first time around.
Because we're talking about how your clients have to be, at least at some level, psychologically and cognitively and emotionally ready to proceed with pursuing a relationship if they're knocking on your door, right?
Right. Because I know both people, both parties, I tend to be able to give people some insight into what the other person might be thinking. That really helps move people over those speed bumps.
I like that analogy, that you help people move over the speed bumps in relationships.
As far as the demographics, I am affiliated with a network of matchmakers across the country. I can put people in touch with somebody in their community if they only want to meet people in their community. I've also seen situations where people meet long distance and they make it work. I believe the right relationship is worth that sacrifice. I want to find out from people, are they restricting their search to people who are local? Are they open to long distance? If they want my help, I might not be able to help them if they are somewhere else in another city or another market, but I'm pretty confident I can put them in the right hands, the people in their own market.
If listeners want to get in touch with you and connect with you, or just learn more about your matchmaking services, share with us how they can do that. And I will also put that information in the show notes too.
Thank you. The traditional way, they can call me on the phone. My number is on my website, leorahoffman.com or lovebyleora.com. I am on Instagram, although I have a very small social media presence, and I've really done that intentionally because I've kept my practice small and boutique-y. I like it that way. My email, leora@leorahoffman.com. All they have to do is Google Matchmakers, Washington, D.C., and I'll come up. I'm there if people want to reach out. I'm happy to have a free initial consultation with someone who just wants to get some advice or direction. I really, really appreciate people taking that leap of faith by reaching out and seeing if I might be able to support and assist them.
Thank you, Leora. I'll also put the link to your book in the show notes.
Oh, thank you very much. I love feedback, so I welcome readers to get in touch with me if they read my book and to give me their thoughts.
Thank you for being a guest here on Sexy in Your 60s, Leora. This has been such a thoughtful and grounding conversation. What I appreciate about your perspective is that it brings dignity and depth to a part of life that can really feel vulnerable, confusing, or discouraging for so many people. And you've reminded us that love isn't about perfection, performance, or chasing fantasy. It's about connection, discernment, courage, and staying open to what's possible. That message is especially powerful for women in midlife and beyond. And to everyone listening, whether you are dating, partnered, healing, or simply reflecting on what connection means to you now, I hope this conversation reminds you that this season of life is not too late for love, not too late for joy, as Leora said, and not too late for meaningful companionship, whatever that looks like. Thank you for listening to Sexy in Your 60s. If this episode spoke to you, please share it with a friend, subscribe, and leave a review. You can find more of my work at Slant to Plants, where I support women in creating vibrant health, confidence, and longevity in ways that feel realistic and sustainable. Until next time, take good care of yourself and keep showing up for the life that you want to live.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
It has been great. If you're a woman 50 and above and you're doing a lot of the right things, but you still don't feel as strong and steady as you want to, I'm hosting a free live workshop called the 5-Minute Reality Check for women 50 and above. We'll look at the 4 areas that quietly drive energy and aging well: strength, fiber, sleep, and alcohol. And you'll leave with one simple next step that you can actually do right away. Join me on Thursday, April 30th at 4:30 p.m. Pacific Time. Save your spot at slanttoplants.com/realitycheck. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. If today's conversation resonated with you, I invite you to take the next gentle step by downloading the Sexy in Your 60s Starter Guide, a free resource designed to help you reflect on what supports your energy, vitality, and sense of connection in this season of life. You'll find it linked in the show notes or at slanttoplants.com/starter-guide. You can also explore more of my work, including health coaching, plant-forward nutrition, and resources for vibrant living at slanttoplants.com. And for the ultimate transformation, join the Sexy in Your 60s coaching experience at sexyinyour60s.com. If this episode spoke to you, please consider following the podcast, leaving a review, or sharing it with someone who might need it right now. That's how these conversations continue to grow. Until next time, take care of yourself, stay curious, and stay boldly, beautifully sexy, exactly as you are.